We're going to cover section 2 and 3 in one video. We're going to go pretty quick. That way we can wrap this chapter up this week. Climate and vegetation. The climate conditions in South Asia range from frigid cold in the mountains. That's the only place you're going to find cold, is up in the top of the Himalayas, to intense heat in the desert to the west. The big thing, though, the big new thing when it comes to the climate here is the seasonal winds that affect both the climate and the vegetation of South Asia, the monsoon. The monsoon winds are what we call those seasonal winds. So let's start and run down the climate map here. Cold highland zone in the Himalayas. So the highland zone right up here in the Himalayas, and other northern mountains, the Hindu Kush mountains and things like that, create this cold northern or cold highland zone. Humid subtropical in the foothills, Nepal, Bhutan, and the Indo-Gangetic Plain. So what we're talking about here is here's Nepal and here's Bhutan. So in the lower lands, which is still the foothills. Foothills means like those the lower hills in front of the mountains. Nepal and Bhutan are basically entirely in the hills and the mountains. So the lower ones have a humid subtropical, which is like our climate. Okay, remember they have humid subtropical as our climate. All right, the Indo-Gangetic Plain. So we're talking about this is what we call the Indo-Gangetic Plain. Is this little stretch right through here where the Ganges River flows? Gangetic, right? That Gangetic Plain is mostly humid subtropical, where the heavy, densely populated Indian plain, Indo-Gangetic Plain is where it's heavily populated, is humid subtropical. Semi-arid, when you get lower Indus Valley, down here, the yellow is the indicator of the semi-arid. So lower Indus Valley, you can see India starts to dry out as you go west, right? Somewhat similar to how our climate is in the United States. The further west you go, the drier it gets. Same thing. Got semi-arid climate around here. You have when you get over into the far west, the India border with Pakistan and most of Pakistan, you have the desert zone, and the Indus River is what flows through here, right through the middle of that desert. It almost looks like Egypt whenever, like the green. Pakistan is brown when you look at it on Google Earth, except for the little green strip of the Indus River. The Thar Desert is the driest area with 10 inches of rain annually. This Thar Desert here, very, very dry. Doesn't get much rain. The Indus River, though, flows year-round thanks to the Himalayan snowmelt. Then the tropical wet zone in Sri Lanka. Down here, you have the wet zone here and here where it rains. I mean, we have rainforest in India. So the southwest coast of India and the southwest coast of Sri Lanka is a real rainforest. And you have a tropical wet and dry area and semi-arid in this what's called the Deccan Plateau, all right, here in the south central portion. And if you look here at the vegetation map, you'll see that tropical grassland, even though it's a humid subtropical climate, tropical grassland makes up most of this area. And even though they have a humid subtropical climate over here, it does not get cold in India very much. It is pretty far south. It has warm water on either side of it. The temperature, even though they were saying this is humid subtropical, their winters are way milder than ours, and their summers are not really as hot. It's a little more moderated, but they don't get as cold of winter as we do. Okay, so let's talk about the two weather events they see here well, I guess you call them climatic events, as well as the seasonal wind, the monsoon. So the way the monsoon works, this map down here is kind of small, is that if you remember, land heats and cools faster than water, right? So that creates pressure zones that make air flow to each other. So during the land is heated up faster, the air is rising, creates low pressure over the land, the water is cooler, and it has higher, so that means it has higher pressure over it. We know that high to low, right? So you have high pressure over the water, you have low pressure over the land, and the monsoon winds blow in. So do you think that's the wet or the dry monsoon? Well, during the summer, that's the wet monsoon, because the air coming off of the ocean, off of the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea, brings a ton of moisture, and it rains. Then you have the winter monsoon. Okay, so when the winter monsoon happens, you have the land is cooling down very fast. So since it's cooler, it is the high pressure zone. The low pressure zone is out over the water. The air flows from land out to the water, so it is dry. And that defines the monsoon seasons for India. All right. When it's monsoon season, they flood like very regularly, very, very, very regularly. There's pictures. I mean, I know we see floods occasionally here and other places, but in India, it's like a given that their cities are going to be like in knee and thigh deep water at some point in the year. most of their cities that live in these wetter climates. Cyclones like you see over here. What does that look like? It looks like a hurricane, right? It's the exact same thing, just a different word. Just a reminder, we call them hurricanes if they hit the United States, all right? If they hit the Americas. We call them typhoons if they hit East Asia, which is like Japan and China and stuff. And then if they come over and hit India, we call that a cyclone. Okay, it means they form over here and then come and hit India. That's what we call a cyclone. All right. Gotta figure out how to erase this. There we go. All right. So vegetation zones. We talked about how they have a forested tropical wet zone on the west coast. They have, and in South Bangladesh, lush rainforest of teak, ebony, and bamboo. And so here's some like different, the woods. Those are actually phone cases, just to show you what they look like finished. The other thing that's unique about the teak wood, right? Teak right here is that it can be used in wet environments. It has natural oils, and you can see right there they're selling it for a shower mat. Teak can be used in shower due to its inherent oils that make it resistant to fungus and stuff like that. And so it doesn't really need much extra treatment for it not to rot. It's really, really kind of cool. They also make outdoor furniture out of teak and things like that. Okay, you have the highland forest of pine and fir in northern India, Nepal, Bhutan. The humid subtropical river valleys and the foothills have sal, oak, and chestnut. There's less vegetation in the semi-arid region. You see desert shrubs and grasses, and in the Deccan Plateau and Thar Desert. Sri Lanka's tropical wet and dry climate produces grasses and trees. Remember, Sri Lanka has a perfect climate to grow tea. That's their big crop, their big production thing there. Okay, section 3, the human environment interaction. The rivers. These rivers, these rivers that we mentioned, the big 3, starting with the Ganges that flows through northern India, the Brahmaputra that flows from northeast India and joins the Ganges, makes that massive river delta in Bangladesh, and then you have the Indus River that flows through Pakistan. These things play a central role in the lives of South Asians, particularly the Ganges. Water pollution and flooding pose great challenges to South Asian countries. Okay, let's talk about it. So living along the Ganges, remember the Ganges is right here, starts in the Himalayas, flows through northern India, and it is extremely populated. Remember that population density map, dark red through this stretch right here. This is one of the most populated areas on Earth. Like we're talking about this. This ranks up there with the only other place that has a population corridor like this is China. That's it. No other place. It's shorter than the Indus and the Brahmaputra. It flows 1,500 miles and empties into what's called down here the Bay of Bengal. It drains 3 times the area, 3 times the size of France, and it's home to 350 million people. So this little stretch of river right here has the same population as our whole country, the United States of America. That's how loaded this place is. Provides drinking and farming water, transportation. Is known as Ganga Mai, which means Mother Ganges. So it has religious undertones. We have not studied their religion yet, but it is a religious river too. Okay. It becomes Padma where it meets the Brahmaputra. That's what it's known as, the Padma River down here. Hinduism is the religion of most Indians. We're going to study that more in depth. We'll learn more about it next chapter. To Hindus, the Ganges River is sacred, the sacred home of the goddess Ganga. All right, the mother. That's why they call it the Mother Ganges. They believe that everything itself comes from this river. Hindus believe the waters have healing powers, and so that means that it is actually a religious, the river itself becomes a religious pilgrimage site where people go to visit. It becomes, temples are built, Hindu temples are built all up and down the Ganges River. So it's not just a river used for transportation, drinking water, farming water. It is used in a spiritual and religious connection to their beliefs. That pilgrims come to bathe, as you can see right here. Like this is all over. Every major city has these points in the river where you can bathe. Here's the other thing: scatter ashes of their dead. So a lot of people, when they die, they want to be put back into the Ganges because they believe all humans came from the Ganges. At the sacred site of Varanasi, people gather daily. This is Varanasi right here. It's kind of like the main holy city on the Ganges River. They float baskets of flowers and burning candles on the water. As you can see down here, there's your flowers and burning candles. Here's some Hindu, I guess you call them monks. I can't remember what you call them. Some Hindu priests and things like that are down here bathing. Normal. Now, what does this create? Now, remember, this place is super populated. Where people are, pollution is. So centuries of use have made the Ganges the most polluted river in the world. Sewage, industrial waste, human bodies poison the water because of all the funerals. We're talking about millions of funerals a year held on the Ganges River, and maybe the body isn't completely incinerated, things like that. Users get stomach and intestinal disease, hepatitis, typhoid, cholera. So there's a lot of, if they drink the water and it's not treated properly, they can get sick from it. In 86, the government planned sewage treatment plants regulations. Today, few plants are operational. Factories still dump waste. Cleanup will take time, money, and a change in how people see the river. So it's an ongoing process. It's gotten better since this slides have been made, but it's still an ongoing process. Overflowing. We talked about the flooding, right? The Feni River flows from Chittagong Hills to the Bay of Bengal, wide, slow-moving river through low-lying coastal plain. We're talking about Bangladesh here. This flat marshy area floods during the wet season. So every monsoon, Bangladesh gets flooded every year. This is not something that happens occasionally. It is almost on the number going to happen every year. The seawater surges up into flatlands, flooding villages whenever they get a cyclone. So, right? So, remember we talked about Bangladesh. I told you Bangladesh is like Louisiana, but we're even more extreme when it comes to flat, low, and swampy. And it is so when they get a cyclone, just like Louisiana with the flooding, it's even worse in Bangladesh, it seems like. And the other thing that makes it worse is that the fact that Bangladesh is very poor. So they don't have the infrastructure. Like in Louisiana, we have built levees and dams and dikes and canals and things that help the water go where we want it to or keep it from going where we want it to. And they don't have those things in Bangladesh. So when it floods, it floods. There is nothing to stop it. And in the 1980s, they actually did try to help it by building an earthen dam over the river's mile-wide mouth to try to keep those floodwaters from going crazy. All right. So this is the pictures of the Bangladesh is a poor nation. When they built this dam, they had no power. They had no equipment. They built it by hand. It's crazy. Bangladesh used their large population of unskilled workers to build the dam. They used cheap materials and a low-tech process. They would lay bamboo mats, weight with boulders, cover with bags of clay, and build a partial closure that then closed the Feni completely February 28th, 1985. When the tide goes out, 15,000 workers fill the gap and 600,000 bags. 7 hours later, the dam is closed. So they built it by hand, a dam to try to keep the flooding at bay. All right. Completing the dam. Later on, eventually they brought dump trucks and earth movers in to raise the clay dam up 30 feet. So they got it. It's only so high by hand. Eventually they had to bring in some equipment. They put concrete and bricks over the sides to build the road and built the road on top. So you see a picture of this dam that was started, built by hand, and finished by equipment. This created South Asia's largest estuary. Or this is South Asia's. What is an estuary? It's a broadened arm of the sea at the river's lower end. Okay, so on the other side of the dam, so here's what an estuary is real quick. When the river slows down, there becomes this point in this area here, right here, that where the marshes form, and it's like salt water and fresh water mixed. So it's not a true like ocean water, super salty. It's got some, it's a little bit salty, and that's what an estuary is. It's a very unique environment. Certain kind of fish live in the estuary, birds and things like that. So it's a very, very unique environment that people try to protect because there's very unique animals that live there. All right. The dam that they built holds against cyclones and storm surges. Villages and lands are more protected than they used to be. But Bangladesh still gets flooded, I'm telling you, every year. All right. That is the physical geography of South Asia.